So it's not a theory. It's not even a phenomena that you can observe and describe to study. But because it's come into existence as somebody explaining something and then being described as science and then given the label theory of gravity, which is out of date by 106 years, I might add. But nevertheless, because it's been ascribed that title, you would assume, perfectly reasonable because you've been told so, that that's something you need to concern yourself with, the theory of gravity, when in reality there's not even a phenomena to study. There's nothing occurring to study. You can say, I pick my keys up and drop them, but the explanation for that is you picking them up and dropping them.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
It's definitely more than that, yeah.
Next.
So just for shits and giggles, I'll say I've spent the last 40 minutes trying to explain to my coworker the difference between a theory and a scientific theory. After claiming to understand it, show me I don't understand.
So a mystic Meg theory, otherwise known as colloquial theory, would be your guess at why something happens, mystic Meg style. A scientific theory would be the result of experimental data based on hypotheses, based on natural phenomena that you figured out the cause of. That would be a scientific theory. Colloquial theory, best guess.
Can I get you to say that again one more time?
Yeah. So a colloquial theory or mystic Meg theory would be your best guess or best explanation for something you think might happen because you've had a good guess about it. That's a colloquial theory. I reckon this is that. That's colloquial theory. A scientific theory is the result of scientific experimentation based on hypotheses, based on natural phenomena that you're attempting to figure out the cause of. So that's a scientific theory.
Okay, so that's what I try to explain to him as well. But he's trying to tell me that gravity is not a theory. I don't know if it's a scientific theory or not. I mean, it seems like it would be because, you know, there's things to explain it. And those things are explainable. So,
but a scientific theory is based on hypothesis. So experimentation,
correct.
Then theory.
Which would be, yeah. So, and then they like found out that it's factual, and now it's a scientific theory, correct?
No, hypothesis.
Well, hypothesis is a theory.
No, a theory is a theory. It comes after experimentation, which comes after hypothesis. So no, a hypothesis is a hypothesis, a theory is a theory. The first thing that comes before theory is hypothesis. So for gravity to be a theory, you'd need to have a hypothesis first.
Okay, so what you're telling me, just so I understand it, so you have a hypothesis or an idea, right? And then the idea becomes a theory. And then from a theory, you have scientific theory, which is actual like factual theories, where an idea has then become a scientific theory.
No, no. A hypothesis, not an idea. You've substituted the word hypothesis for idea. Now, in pseudoscience, you accurately described how pseudoscience, just so stories, get described inaccurately by fraudsters as science. That's how your description pads out. Come up with an idea, that's a mystic Meg theory, and then say that you've done science, and then just call it a scientific theory. Whereas an actual science would be based on a hypothesis that's been validated. So validated hypotheses, that's experimental data, then becomes scientific theory.
You lost me now.
So first phenomena, then hypothesis, that's best guess for the explanation of the phenomena, then experiment, validate your best guess as the cause of the effect you're studying, then theory.
Well, I mean, he just told you the order, but all you did was ask him, well, instead of that order that you're telling me about, since I'm asking you, shouldn't you just put theory in front instead of behind? Why would you ask that?
Why would I ask?
That's fine. That's fine. So let me
because I'm trying to
maybe I
understand.
can explain it. Well, I don't think I could explain it better, but I'll try. So the hypothesis is a supposition. Okay, it's your guess as to what's causing the phenomena that you're observing, right? So once you do some experimentation to figure out that your supposition is correct, or it could be incorrect, that would be the null hypothesis. The result is the theory. So you can't have. So you can't have.
Hold on, Eli. Hold on, chocolate. Hold on, Eli.
The result would be a scientific theory, right?
I missed the first part. Hold on, everyone, shut up. Sorry, what's your name, madam?
Candy.
Candy. Can you repeat what you said, please?
I don't know. I'm lost now.
That's okay.
So it would be hypothesis, or no? You were saying it would be a theory, and then a hypothesis, and then a scientific theory, right? Because a hypothesis would explain the workings of a theory. Is that right?
Wrong. No. So you just accurately described what actually happens when fraudsters claim science. Yeah? So you start off with a colloquial theory, claim you've operated it within a hypothesis, and then just say that the hypothesis was an explanation, therefore science, and then call it scientific theory. That's pseudoscience in essence. That's what happens with things like gravity. So in a way, you're right, that's what the public is led to believe is science. So I appreciate and empathise that you could give it as the description. But where you say that the hypothesis is an explanation, it isn't. It's your presumed explanation that hasn't been validated yet. So, and it's your explanation for something that's occurred. So the first thing that needs to be established if you're doing science, in this case gravity, is what's the phenomena observed? What's the thing you're actually studying?
Okay. All right. I will take all this into consideration.
Well, it's a question. It's a question. What in the case of gravity, what's the thing being studied? What's your phenomena? What's the thing that's happening?
So my understanding is that gravity is a relationship between two objects.
Okay.
Right? And so like there's a lot of things that go on in that relationship, like it being science. Yeah, like science, that was stupid. No, like it being math. Calculations between like maybe myself, the ground, and the object I'm holding in my hand. And then so a theory, to me, gravity being a theory, would explain those phenomenons happening where I'm holding my keys out and dropping them to the floor, and then mathematically, my theory would become correct. Does that make sense?
It does, because that's what's explained to you as gravity. Drop something, and then the relationship between the mass of the Earth and the keys is that they're attracting one another. Is that your supposition at this stage?
No, I understand gravity to be a theory, and the theory is all those mechanical mathematics that are going on inside my keys hitting the floor. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, other than that relationship is being described as mass attracting mass, and the air around you also has mass. And
it's not exactly mass attracting mass, because there is some calculations as to when the keys like falling to where the keys would be measured, like going higher, not just lower to the ground. Does that make sense?
Not really. Do you tend to observe lots of...
Explain it.
Okay, when I say what's the phenomena that you're describing isn't something that I observe. So I don't tend to notice that keys are falling to the ground around me. Unless, of course, someone picks them up and drops them. So when someone asks me why do keys fall to the ground, I say because someone picked them up and dropped them. But for the fact that someone picked them up and then dropped them, they wouldn't be falling to the ground. They'd just be static in equilibrium.
Okay, to me that doesn't have anything to do with the theory of gravity. But okay.
Well, gravity, depending on which one you're talking about, is mass attracting mass.
Well, so that would be like a weird phenomenon to me. like mass attracting mass.
Right, it doesn't.
Like,
It doesn't. You cut me off when I tried to explain it. You cut me off when I tried to explain it. So mass, there's mass in the air around you. That's got mass. And it definitely isn't attracting. In fact, if it encounters anything, it bounces off it. In all directions. It's got mass, but yet it's not attracted to the mass of Earth. But that is the 106-year out-of-date version of gravity. Mass attracting mass. Your keys moving towards the mass of Earth. But you had to pick them up first, and furthermore, gas has mass and isn't moving down towards the centre of Earth. It's expanding in all directions.
Okay.
Could I have a chance?
So just to round out before you join in. So it's not a theory. It's not even a phenomena that you can observe and describe to study. But because it's come into existence as somebody explaining something and then being described as science and then given the label theory of gravity, which is out of date by 106 years, I might add. But nevertheless, because it's been ascribed that title, you would assume, perfectly reasonable because you've been told so, that that's something you need to concern yourself with, the theory of gravity, when in reality there's not even a phenomena to study. There's nothing occurring to study. You can say, I pick my keys up and drop them, but the explanation for that is you picking them up and dropping them.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
It's definitely more than that. Yeah. Definitely more
Tell me.
Candy.
Hold on. Just let her tell. You disagree. That's good. What do you disagree with?
Because you said that gravity is mass attracting, like matter attracting matter. And for me, that's not how I understand gravity to be, or that's not my theory of what gravity is.
But we're not talking about your theory. We're talking about Einsteinian and Newtonian gravitational laws and theories. That's who we concern ourselves with, as opposed to you and what you think it is. No offence, but, you know, Candy, you're not the arbiter of gravity. No offence.
All right, no offence taken.
Cool. So, meanwhile, it is described 106 years ago as mass attracting mass, i.e. keys moving to the mass of Earth. That's kind of a vague understanding that you do have. And it isn't, because gas has mass, and it isn't moving to the centre of Earth.
Didn't Einstein do it, come up with a theory, like, where he said that that gravity is a theory? Like, didn't he explain, like, hold on a second, what I'm at a loss for words right now.
No, it's okay. Theory of general relativity is what you're clutching at straws to get, but that's fine. Yeah, theory of general relativity, another colloquial use of this scientific term, though.
Okay. All right, I'll go think about what you guys said.
Thank you very much. You've been an absolute pleasure to talk to, by the way. Thank you, Candy.
Thanks.
Could I say something to Candy?
You can't, because she's disappeared. She's on Chocolate's phone.
Yeah, she's still here. She's still here. Bad.
Candy,
Yes.
you know the phenomenon, the effects where we see, you pick up your keys and you let them go and they fall to the ground. We've already proven what that is with scientific experiment, that it's relative density. It has nothing to do with any force of attraction or any curvature of space-time or anything like that. We've already proven that with science experiment what that is. It's just your keys are much heavier and more dense than the air that surrounds it. So the air that surrounds it can't possibly hold those keys up in the air, can it? The keys are going to fall through that medium until they reach something, and until they reach another medium, which would be the ground, that would be dense enough to support them. You understand what I mean? In the most basic terms? It's like, if it's, how is the air keys going to, we're all made of steel, how are they going to stay floating in the air? They're not. They're going to fall through that. But if you put them into water, they'll fall through that as well, but a little bit slower. Why? Because water is a little bit more dense than air. So
my understanding of what you're saying is it's been validated that I can hold my keys out and it hit the floor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I understand it like the theory that's also a theory that's been validated and now a scientific theory, correct?
No. When it's described as mass attracting mass, no. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
Sorry, it being proven that it's due to the density relationship between, let's say, the keys and the air. Yeah, that has been proven with scientific experiment. But a scientific experiment that proves something doesn't become a scientific theory straight away. That adheres to scientific method. So it's been proven without a shadow of a doubt. You can even do it yourself. You can do the same experiment yourself about density, and you will always find the same relationship.
And because that's validated, right? So
what's validated, Candy? Sorry.
Like having the math and all those things there, right, to explain it. Like
math is not a scientific proof. Math is just math. It's just description.
Let me try, Brian. Hold on.
Okay.
You're saying, has there actually been any science done? Is that what you're asking? Has this at all been validated? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm saying because it can be validated, like all those mathematical things that he said is true. So like it's no longer just a theory, and then now gravity is a scientific theory.
Okay, what you're now doing,
because
no offense,
it's no
Candy.
longer just an idea, right?
You've said that's the fourth time you've said it. What you're actually doing now is chanting because you want gravity to be a scientific theory. But we've by 3 different methods and 2 different people, we've tried to explain to you it isn't science. So I'll just try and say it in as blunt terms as I can. There isn't any scientific validation or experiments or theories for gravity. There isn't any science for it. Now, you may have been led to believe that the abstract maths somehow becomes physics and science. It isn't. It doesn't. It was all a lie, Candy. There isn't any science for gravity. I'm sorry.
And the scientific theory is like an apparent horizon, right?
Oh, I'm not even going there with you guys. I know how that goes. I know how that goes. I'm not even going there on this one.
Andy, all you need to know is that there is no scientific evidence for gravity, and the reason your keys fall to the floor has already been scientifically proven through science experiment to be a density relationship. That's all you need to know. That's the very basics of it.
The current rhetoric is that the ground is coming up to meet the keys equally as it's falling down to meet the floor. Do you believe that? That's
okay, look,
rhetoric.
I don't want to baffle her with bending geodesics in space-time and Einsteinian gravity nonsense, conceptual mediums. No, like, she's got a general concept of the idea of mass attracting mass, although she doesn't want to relinquish it and wants to give us her version of that, which is fine, I suppose. But ultimately speaking, there isn't any science for this. That's the main point. Now, it's been mentioned by Brian, I believe, but there is science to prove empirically the relationship with relative density. That can be scientifically validated and has been. So when you want to say, oh, let's bandy about what's a theory and what isn't a theory, well, no, you don't need to worry about it. There is experiments that have been done, though, that can validate it as a disequilibrium. So you can force your keys into disequilibrium and they will return to equilibrium based on the density and the medium that they're in, relative to it. That's relative density disequilibrium if you're going to describe your keys passing through air to equilibrium. So it's described accurately, you can qualify it mathematically, but the description and explanation has been acquired experimentally. That's the main thing. Gravity hasn't.
That was an interesting back and forth. At first I was concerned about how she was interpreting theory. So I'm still not sure how she interprets theory versus a scientific theory, which has been validated. But a theory that hasn't gone through the scientific method is not validated. Do you think she was stuck there somewhere?
Yeah, stuck in a bit of a loop, because it's like, well, surely if it's been described as a theory, then the maths backs it as science. That's essentially the essence of what she's saying. Well, you go, okay, fine, you've been led to believe that, and I get it. And you could probably find me citation for that. Does it mean that it is actually empirically validated? No. Well, we know what empirical validation requires. It's going through the scientific method. Now, you can find nice, easy reference for what pseudoscience is. Anything that's claimed to be science that hasn't gone through the scientific method, that's pseudoscience. So then you need to know what the scientific method is, to know whether or not a claim of science is pseudoscience or not. Well, what defines it as science and what defines it as pseudoscience? Well, going through the method would be science. Not going through the method would be pseudoscience. So when I'm asked, well, does the maths validate this as a scientific theory? Well, maths is abstract. It's not validation by systematic experimentation, therefore it's not science. So no. If you ask me if maths is validating something, when you describe something and then put it through what you call a hypothesis, also known as your explanation, not supposition yet to be validated, which is what an actual scientific prediction, otherwise known as hypothesis, is. Well, no, it's not just an explanation that then moves on to be a scientific theory. That's the work of bullshit artists. That's why you think you're standing on a sphere with a non-force force you can think of as a force called gravity that comes out of a reification of abstract mathematics described as science. Actually, pseudoscience. Turns out it wasn't science. Turns out they lied to you. Turns out there's people out there that hijack the terms of science to make you think that things exist when they don't. Fraudsters. Well, okay. But all we can do is say this is what pseudoscience is. A claim of science that hasn't been through the method of science. That's all it is. So therefore, to be science, you've got to go through the method of science. What's that you say? Well, that would be a hypothesis test. What's a hypothesis? A phenomena you're studying, also known as dependent variable, and your assumed cause of that effect that you'll vary to see if it causes it. If you cause it, you've validated it, that's a successful experiment which you can then build a theory on. That's science. Now, most of the stuff that we're told about the heliocentric theory, in quotes, isn't science. It's philosophy.
A concept without empiricism is not a theory. A science without a theory is not science.
I like that. It's funny, prior to this whole show and learning about the scientific theory, everybody says to everybody, I guess in a colloquial way, hey, what's your theory on this? Or what's your best guess on this? But they always use that term theory. What's your theory about what's going to take place? So it's really, what's your guess? That was
the whole conversation. That's how it started. And I appreciate that, guys, because I figured maybe it'll sound a little bit different coming from somebody that's not me. So appreciate that. But yeah,
she was very nice.
Can you conversation?
Thank her again for me. She was very nice.
Candy,
she was a nice lady.
Nathan said thank you. Yeah.
You got a shout out from Nathan.
But furthermore, what I found fascinating was it's normal human nature to start going through that cognitive loop. My understanding is that theories based on maths, and it's the maths of me dropping something, that's therefore science. She said it about 3 or 4 times, because it's a cognitive break in your programming when somebody points out something that you thought was correct, and then suddenly turns out to be a complete lie. It's actually quite difficult to swallow, and I get it. So that's why you end up in those cognitive loops. Some people feed those cognitive loops, and that ends up in what we describe as their pain. Because you can't do that indefinitely. That's the definition of cognitive dissonance. Well, that's pain. Mental pain. No one wants that. So what do? Do you keep telling yourself that they're maths, abstractions, numbers on paper aren't reality? That's not physics, it's maths. But you want to think that maths is science, that's physics, the physical, because they've done the numbers? It's like, no, you've been deceived by people that need to convince you with numbers and tell you that numbers are reality. And they're not. They're descriptions, it's like language. Well, describing something isn't explaining something. You can describe things with maths all day. I can describe the digestive system of a unicorn based on how much hay it eats in Narnia. I can mathematically quantify that all day long. Does it mean it's physical? Does it mean it's physics? Does it mean if I give you the maths perfectly, that becomes a scientific theory? No. But that's precisely what people have done now, isn't it? So you have everybody under the impression that when they've been given a load of maths, or statistics, or correlations, that it's science. And it isn't.
Shout out to Quantum Eraser, who's been waking up the world since 2016.
Indeed. This is basically down to him. We were all taught it in 5th grade, but we all forgot about it and just swallowed the magic pill of it's science, therefore it's empirical, whenever the word was uttered. Whenever you heard the word theory, you knew it was loosely associated with science, so you assumed that the thing being said was empirically proven. You heard the word experiment many times in the science lesson where they told you about empiricism and attached methodology to achieve it. But when you hear the word experiment now, when they're talking about how tyres grip better, you think this is empirical. Works wonders for selling stuff. It works wonders for selling you your entire worldview.